Hello, I'm Mandisa Thomas, founder and president of Black Nonbelievers. We hope you are enjoying this year's Secular Student Alliance Conference. In case you aren't already familiar with us, Black Nonbelievers is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Headquartered in the Atlanta area, we connect with other Blacks and allies who are living free of religion by providing a caring, friendly, and informative environment. Instead of accepting dogma, we determine truth and morality through reason and evidence. The mission of Black Nonbelievers is to provide secular fellowship, nurture and support nonbelievers in coming out, i.e. open identification, to promote pride in the atheist and secular identities, and to organize members for a variety of events and charitable causes. Black Nonbelievers welcomes all, regardless of age, gender identity, sexual identity, national origin, and racial identity. 2021 marks 10 years of Black Nonbelievers building community, increasing the representation of the Black atheist demographic, and advocating for true liberation. And we need you to help us continue and expand on our work. Please do follow us and subscribe on social media. On Facebook at Black Nonbelievers, Instagram at BNonbelievers Inc., Twitter at BNonbelievers, and YouTube at Black Nonbelievers Inc. Also, please do visit our website at blacknonbelievers.org to find out the many ways that you can contribute and support our organization financially. Finally, we hope that you will join us for our upcoming events, including the Women of Color Beyond Belief Conference, which can now be streamed online, and we have student discounts available, and BNCCon in November. Thank you very much, and continue to enjoy the conference.
All right, thank you so much, Kevin. I'll pick it up here since I'm kind of the host of this conversation, and Sasha is the star, and this book is the star. I love it. I've read it
Thanks, Greg.
multiple times, and we've discussed it multiple times, and I'm always happy to discuss this topic with you, Sasha. But I really recommend right away. You can log off and just go buy the book and read the book, but no. You take an hour first and listen to us, because it's going to be a lot of fun, and then it'll enrich your reading of the book, which you will of course purchase, folks. So all right, so anyway, welcome. Thanks everybody for being here with the SSA, and thank you, Kevin, for having us. I love the SSA. Sasha, is this your first ritual with the SSA?
Yes, it is. And I'm so delighted to be here and to be talking to you, Greg. Greg and I are really friends in real life. So it's just like you're coming to coffee with us.
Yeah, exactly. But we've never hung out at an SSA conference before, and that's
so it's new. And I'm so glad to be here. And congratulations to all the graduates who are moving on after this weird last year and a half. But you didn't necessarily get the traditional rite of passage to do so, but I hope you get to celebrate in some way.
Sasha, what do you think about, before we get into it, like what's your association with graduation and ritual, or the end of the school year and ritual? Like you must have a lot.
It's such a good question. I mean, that like school's out for summer, like that song, like there is something that encapsulates that is so powerful. And I loved school. I mean, shocker, huge nerd, but like I wasn't like, counting the days. I mean, there were probably some teachers that I was ready to part ways with, but like I loved school, but still there was something about that feverish feeling every year, not just like at the end of high school or college, of like spring, and just like, the inability to concentrate, and just like wanting to go like run outside with your friends and just get into all sorts of trouble, which obviously changed as the years went on, what kind of trouble. But, I just think about, in terms of graduation, I think it really encapsulates our need, even for secular people, this need for a ritual and a rite of passage, because it's like, so last May, I knew a couple of people who were finishing college, and one person grad school, one person college, people I know well. And it really became so clear. It's like, you still hit the piece of paper, you still have the education, you still put it on your resume, you still, everything is the same, except that this, act of crossing a stage in this gown and this really weird hat that we've concocted for this occasion as human beings. And, going through that ritual, it allows you to have the emotion of crossing the threshold into, I finished this, now I'm going to go do something else with this education, with this information, with this degree. And I think that there's something about that really crystallizes why we love rituals and why we need them, and why we have to, the way it helps us wrap our minds around change. That's so much of it, right? The change happens whether we do the ritual or not, but it doesn't feel complete without it. And it's like the kind of thing, if you were explaining to some, I don't know, someone from outer space or someone from a totally different culture, that it's like that you get all this information, you memorize it, you have this testing, you have to write these papers, you do all these things, depending what kind of school it is, and then you cross the stage in this outfit and you get a piece of paper. Sometimes it's not even the actual diploma, they mail it to you later, but it's so important to us. And I just think, I don't know, there's something about that change of going from, the end of a program, end of high school, the end of whatever it is, that doesn't feel like the same without it. So I
think people really like funny hats and gowns too. I was picturing in the future when it's all Space Academy and we're wearing spacesuits. To graduate from Space Academy, people will put on jeans and some sort of shirt with buttons. They'll be like, "This is weird. Come on, you look weird. All right, let's go graduate." All right, so let me get into a little bit. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, there is something about, like, in our rituals, we have costumes. There is something about it that's like a performance art piece. And part of that is the costume. And I think, like weddings is another good example where the costume is kind of central to the operation.
Yeah. Did you wear a white dress at your wedding?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's so ridiculous. I mean, my husband and I lived together for like many years before we got married. And I realized that it is totally this weird Victorian, like totally sexist purity symbol thing. And obviously in different cultures, it's different color dresses. In China, it's red. But at the same time, I don't know. I was just like, that's how I imagine it. And that's the costume for the occasion, even if you can trace it back to something that's really antiquated. Yeah, I totally did. My husband wore a tuxedo. We're very traditional.
All right, good. Because I like we're already getting people started. We're priming our minds here to think that there are these things that happen, whether in our day-to-day lives or at least in our totally secular lives, our lives that seem to be completely set apart from anything religious, that are in fact rituals, and that define a lot of our experience of living in the world as humans or whatever else we might be. And and that's important. It's important to sort of have a handle on that as people who are defining ourselves as secular in whatever way that means, or allies of the secular if you're on this Zoom. And I think if we're not aware of it, then we can't make it better, right? We want lives that I think that are meaningful, that are filled with wonder and fascination and inspiration, as the stories that you tell throughout your book constantly reaffirm. And if you're not sort of aware enough of what rituals are in your life, then to refine them or analyze them, then you really may not be able to bring the most meaning that you could into your own life. So this is great. All right, let me start out here. I'm on page 6 and 7 of your book. Okay. The book it's a memoir. It's a family reflection. It's a deeply humanist and secular book about living a meaningful life, a life filled with love and wonder and family, and a sense of connectedness to the past and to the future. And it's really one of my favorite and one of the more important humanist and secular books that's come out in my generation or in sort of recent memory.
That's so nice.
People should have it on the bookshelf. What are you doing? You gotta have it on there. All right, so I love doing capitalism for my friends. I mean, there's nothing better. All right, so okay, so I'm going to read from page 7 first, and then page 6, and then I'm going to have you discuss the both excerpts. So on 7, you say, for me, the biggest drawback to being secular is the lack of a shared culture. I can live without an afterlife, you say, but I can live without a God, but not without celebrations, not without community, not without ritual. There are no hymns about the testing of theories or the mapping of genomes, no festivals to commemorate great inventions or medical breakthroughs. Since I long to honor the wonder of life, I've found myself making up new rituals. All right, everybody out there? So hold on to that for a second. And then I just want to read you something from the previous page. You say, Sasha, we humans are very good celebrators. I dare say we're the best at it in the whole wide world. Other species may express giddy enthusiasm when there's plenty to eat or when it's time to mate. Those events are certainly worthy. We celebrate them too, but other species don't plan parties. They don't prepare feasts. They don't wear special outfits, put up special decorations, or say special words. They hardly even take the day off. Yeah, like anybody I know takes the day off, Sasha. Come on. All right, so those two juxtaposed. Talk about the one and the other in whichever order you want. The lack of the secular culture or the human tendency to make culture.
So for context, I grew up in this, I'm in my mother's house right now. In this house I'm in right now, with, my father is a scientist, my mom is a writer producer, and they instilled this sense of awe and wonder about the universe and about science as a pathway to reveal nature that is more profound and awe-inspiring than any of the tales that we have made up for ourselves. But we also carried on in a secular way a lot of the Jewish traditions that my parents and their parents had, and back had grown up with. And so I grew up, with this sort of very, very light form of secular Judaism, because, when it's cold and the days are short and it gets dark at this latitude, at like 4:30 in the afternoon, there is such a deep urge to have something, some celebration, some making of light, and around, the same moments around the year, so many cultures, whether it's the winter solstice or the spring equinox, there's so many moments where human beings have created rituals that reflect what is happening in nature. And so my parents found different ways to do that. And I think for me, it gave me this freedom to carry on the traditions of my ancestors that meant a lot to me, because I do feel, there is something very powerful about doing something that your great-grandparents did, or people whose names are lost, but one thing about them, which is maybe that at this time of year, they were probably doing this, or on this occasion, they were probably doing this. But I had this freedom where I didn't feel like the traditions and rituals I wasn't beholden to them. I wasn't obligated to keep carrying them on. And I could choose the ones that were meaningful to me, and that I could let, reflect what I really believed. And I think that is, I think when the people I've known in my life who were brought up with very devoutly and then rejected that theology, of course the pendulum has to swing, and then it's hard to want to do anything that is remotely related to that. But I think that there's a way to take the things that, remind you of your grandmother or whatever it is in a secular way forward, and let certain traditions mutate in order to survive, and each person, each family, each couple, has to figure out how to do that. Because, talking about graduations and change, my mother always says, there's no refuge from change in the cosmos. And I think that's what all these rituals are about around the world throughout time, the changing of the seasons, the changing over the course of a human life, right? These biological and astronomical changes. These are the events that we've built the rituals around. And sometimes we have to peel back some really unscientific stuff and cultural stuff and societal norms and things that are not going to fly anymore, or things that just are irrelevant, and find the kernel of the real natural scientific event that we're celebrating. And so that's what I'm really interested in. And I think that, for me, I'm very, as Greg will tell you, I'm a very extroverted person. And I like celebrations. I like being around people. Maybe, I like having events and things to dress up for. And I like experiencing these changes over the course of life in a group, with family, with friends. And I think that what I'm really interested in is, how do we do that without the infrastructure of religion? Mm-hmm. So I think that there is a pathway forward, that allows us to underscore the things that are tangibly, provably real, that are supported by science, with the same joyful sense of togetherness and feasts and music and all the things that, at its best, religion can offer. Does that answer your question at all, Greg?
Yeah, it's a lot to get started on. It's great. One thing that I'll comment on there is that there's two broad categories that I heard in what you just shared. There is the secularized, whether very intentionally secularized or lightly intentionally secularized, right, or unintentionally secularized religious ritual, right? Mm-hmm. Human beings have been, by and large, religious since the dawning of time, and the modern age is the age in which a significant percentage of us have moved away from that and have started to create something new. But there's so much religious heritage for all of humanity up to this point. There's the rituals that we can take from those religious traditions and bring into a new modern way of doing them. And then there's also the second part of what I heard from you, which is the sort of rituals that are really more about celebrating life, and that they don't necessarily have a religious root, or at least one that we have, you know, almost any way of connecting with. You know, you talk about drinking coffee at times, right? I mean, like that's an example to me of a sort of second category of ritual.
Totally. Well, I will say this, the religious stuff, I mean, one of the things that I think is so important is sometimes we feel this like intense, heavy sense of like guilt about like, I don't want to be the one to be the first one to break this tradition that feels like it's been going on forever. And all these people, you know, sacrifice, especially if your ancestors were, you know, any members of oppressed groups, people who were had to flee, you know, all these things that were kept sacred for so long. You don't want to be the one to break the chain. But I think when we really look at the scale of human history, all that stuff, even the most traditional stuff, is brand spanking new. And I think that that lets us, right, the clearer we are on how old the planet and our species are, the easier it is to let go of some of the stuff, because it doesn't feel like it's been here forever. And I think that, you know, the most traditional things, the things that we can absolutely be sure that all of our ancestors, no matter what part of the world we're doing, if we go far enough back, is, you know, these experiences of like cooking a meal together, raising children in a group, looking up at the night sky, being like, wonder what that is. You know, those kinds of things are really the most traditional. And I think for most of human history, understanding nature and understanding our deities, that was the same pursuit. And it's only recently that those roads have diverged.
Yeah, right. I mean, and we no longer engage in the ritual meal of Stegosaurus that our Tyrannosaurus Rex ancestors engaged in, you know, I'm sure on a regular and delicious basis. So, all right, so let me ask you, like, on the positive side of this, because I actually have a couple questions for you in a minute, and then we're going to get to the SSA Radio Hour. We're going to see what what's on people's minds, but I want to ask you about the positive side of this and the negative side of this as well, to get people's minds moving a little bit.
Yeah.
On the positive side, like, talk about you try to imbue your own life with rituals. People can read the book for a whole range of them, and you sort of walk around after reading Sasha's book like a little bit like, oh yeah, oh there's this, you know, you see your family interactions a little differently after you read it. You see, you know, a walk in nature a little differently. Let me ask you this way. The past year, we've all been so thrown off of our rituals, right? So what have been the things that you've turned to either in your practical life or in your thinking as, you know, wow, this really strikes me, especially in a year or a time like this, as particularly a meaningful kind of secular ritual?
Yeah, it's been so interesting because it's like, you know, now that it's more than a whole year, everyone has had every holiday that they celebrate. Everyone has had a birthday. We have gone through everything, you know, cyclical that, you know, annually cyclical that we go through. And because there has been so much loss, you know, it's also highlighted so many of the rituals around mourning and grief that people do. And because we haven't been able to do anything in the ordinary way, I think it's allowed us to look at what we're doing in small ways and large ways and see what we want. You know, it'll be really interesting to see what we keep going forward and the things that we'll appreciate that used to feel like such a drag. Like, did you really want to go to your like great aunts for Thanksgiving every year, like 6-hour drive or whatever it is? And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can't wait for that, you know, because we weren't able to. But I think also a lot of things are going to be maybe fall by the wayside that we realize, you know what, we didn't do that this year and it was okay. And actually we preferred it. And so I think one of the things that I'm really interested in is the little things that we do that we don't think of as rituals, but still help us keep this internal, it's almost like an internal timekeeping thing. You know, if you do something every morning, if you do something every week, that maybe isn't explicitly spiritual, or like even something, I mean, it's so interesting because like yoga and meditation have taken on such a secular life of their own. And I think so many people have taken that up over the last year with so much stress and so much isolation. And, those are things that were originally, came out of a religious tradition, and they've taken on this other life of their own. But when I have a small child, and as does Greg, and when the pandemic first started, playgrounds were closed, and we live in an apartment, and she needed to go outside because they're supposed to. We started, so we tried to figure out where we could go outside, where it was safe, and where we could stay away from other people, but get some fresh air. And so we found like a national park that's like 25 minutes from where we live in Boston. And we started going every weekend, my husband and our daughter. And the facilities and everything were closed, but the trails were open, like at the very beginning of the pandemic, where we didn't know, like, it didn't live on surfaces. How close could you, when it was like the complete, like when we were just finding our way in the dark. And we started doing this walk at this park. And our daughter, after, a few months, was like, when things go back to normal, can we still go to the forest? And it was like one of these things that, the playgrounds eventually reopened, and, things are now feel like they're really starting to go back to normal. And my husband and I are vaccinated, but it was like, oh, we're going to keep doing this. And this is something that's really meaningful, that was born out of the necessity of a difficult situation that we're going to bring forward. And I think that that's something that is really powerful. And I think a lot of rituals kind of start that way. A lot of holidays, a lot of traditions are born out of a story where someone was in a pinch, big or small, and something new was created. So yeah, I just think, the little things that we do in daily life. We talk about coffee, I write about it in my book. It's like, if you took a step back and you just see it as, there's a plant that grows in the earth. We figured out how to like mush it up and like percolate it, and we drink it, and it gives us superpowers. We're able to do that. I don't know about you, but I am able to do things that would be otherwise not possible if I didn't have it. And it's like, it's right, it's real. The caffeine molecule is understandable. We know why it works. But sometimes, we have this habit of like maligning facts as cold and hard. And it's like, if we could describe all of these very sort of, regular daily things as though it was in a fairy tale or storybook, I think we would get so much more joy out of that, which is totally evidence-based.
Yeah, right. The stopping to remember the little coffee plant, I love. Even though, like, I never really got into coffee because I decided as a little kid that I didn't want to be addicted to it.
Oh, wow.
I've written, and I'll get into this in a minute with like addiction issues and ritual, because it's been a big theme in my life.
Oh, yes.
But because if you can ritualize something, then when is ritualizing it too much?
Right.
But yeah, I just love the idea of remembering the little plant that you're drinking, the plant that you're eating, the plant that you're grinding up into medicine that's going to make your headache go away, that kind of thing, right?
Totally.
So yeah, and we spent so much time in the woods too, by the way. We probably hiked right past one another at
Right.
on any number of those weekends, because we were doing the ritual Saturday and sometimes Saturday and Sunday hike in the woods for that exact same period of time. And I'm kind of looking forward, like, now the season's changing, we can do more of that. I'm actually looking forward to getting back out there.
Absolutely.
And we were hardly like John Muir in the Wilderness Society before this thing, right? I assume you weren't as well.
Really, yeah, same. Very indoorsy over here.
So there's that, and I want to ask you about the challenges to this, right? Because sometimes, we secularists are really good about being skeptical about other people's stuff. And sometimes it's harder to be skeptical of your own stuff or of our own stuff. And so, I've been writing about technology and religion and technology as religion, frankly. And, thinking about the rituals that we now go through on a day-to-day basis because our society has become so technologized, right? And I'm writing a book about this. And in one chapter, I have a chapter on ritual in the technology religion. And it's kind of starts with the idea of this thing, right?
Yes.
the rich, in traditional Judaism, you have 3 sets of prayers throughout each day, 4 on the Sabbath. In Islam, you have 5 a day. And I have a humanist student that I just spoke to yesterday who decided that he was going to do all of Ramadan along with his Muslim friends this year, despite being a humanist atheist. And so the 5 prayers a day he did, the fasting every day for a month, the eating a ritual meal every night for a month. But awesome. In the technology culture, 166 times a day for 2/3 of the American population is the average number of times that we check this. And it's under our nose, and we sway with it like an object of worship, right? And about the same number of people, about 2/3 of Americans sleep with this thing, as of last year, study done last year. So my question is, at what point do we create secular rituals that may even have had a deeply pro-human origin, right? The checking of my feed to see what my friends and family members are up to, right? That had a deeply to communicate my ideas, to read their ideas, right? But then all of a sudden it gets mixed with stress and competitiveness and disinformation and spies and cyber attacks, and all of a sudden it's it's ruining elections and things like that, right? So at what point do the secular rituals, like some of the religious rituals that we might have critiqued or critique, become too much, become something that we need to eliminate? Like, how do you distinguish between the good secular ritual and the lousy secular ritual?
Well, I mean, I think that the problems with technology are partly a problem with our critical thinking skills. And like, if that could be on the phone or in person or any of the above, it could be a note scrawled at a, public restroom. If you're getting information from any source, a religious authority, a parent, a random person on Twitter, and you have not been raised, or you are not using your critical thinking skills to discern, is this true? And how do I know? How do I weigh reality, and fantasy? And how do I know if someone says something, even someone really powerful, even someone who seems really, like they know a lot of stuff, says something, how can I test that reality? I think if we don't have those skills, and I think I do think that when children are raised not to ask really difficult questions, and when that's discouraged, and especially when children are told to just believe things on faith and on authority, and the like really long, like sometimes kind of annoying why phase, like when those questions are shut down, then those muscles they don't develop. And then when we're adults, we don't have that skill set. And it's not just religion, it's any point of view that is not allowed to be questioned, right? If something can stand up to scrutiny, then questions should be welcome. It's when adults and people in the position of authority don't want to get into the details, because then they have to ask themselves some difficult questions, or they're worried it's going to change their perspective, that children are dissuaded from asking these hard questions. And then we grow up into a world where if someone posts a picture from their vacation and then someone else, posts a conspiracy theory, and it's on the same screen, and we think, well, that person definitely went to Florida. I believe that. How do I know that this other thing isn't true that I'm looking at right next to it? So I think that it's less about, sure, are people addicted to their phones? For sure. Yeah, no, I definitely have to set some parameters for myself some days to like put Instagram down. But I think that that's, like anything, it's right in all of these cases, whether it's religious rituals or technology or, you know, anything in between. It's right. The extremism, when we are extreme, is the problem. You know, it's rarely as big of a problem if we're able to just take a little bit of time, just stand back a ways and not be so swept up by something that we cannot see the forest for the trees.
Is your kid in a why phase?
Oh yeah. And I have to say, like, I like partly writing the book and just the way my parents raised me, I feel like this is the moment of parenting that like I was like I was born for this. Like this is something that like I feel like I've been preparing for a long time, long before I was a mom. And it's great and it's amazing. And I just am really conscious of like not, I mean, my parents were really good about never saying like, that's just how it is. Or like, so I'm really talking about carrying on traditions. I'm really eager to carry on that tradition and just let the questions keep going. And sometimes the answer is, I don't know. And sometimes I tell her, I don't know, that's a really good question, or nobody knows, or, you know, there must be some selective advantage to why the ant is small and we are big, but I don't know what it is, or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. And, but yeah, she's definitely in it right now. And it's, you know, sometimes it's hard, but it's great. I really do enjoy it.
Sometimes I think my kid maybe is not going through that phase because I try too hard to anticipate all his whys and just proactively explain them to him. like, Dad, you're not giving me a chance to ask my why question.
Right.
So I want to look at what people's comments are. There's a few that I noticed out of the corner of my eye that are worth reading. Like there was one here. I'm not sure that I see the name on it, but when my girlfriend died in mid-December, which, you know, we take part in your grief.
Yeah.
I started a new tradition of lighting a candle every night in the window from the winter solstice until the spring equinox. One large scented candle that lasted a full week.
Oh, that's really beautiful. I think the person's name is Chavi, as where I can see. I'm so sorry, Chavi. That's heartbreaking, and it sounds like a beautiful, beautiful ritual that you created. And there's just something so powerful about lighting candles. It's something so, in Judaism, you know, you light a candle on the anniversary of the death of someone you loved who died. And I think there's something so powerful about candles, and you see it in so many different cultures around the world. And I just always think about how it's like a little mini sun, and it's like so specific to our place on this planet and the solar system that we create this little miniature version of the sun to help carry on a memory. And there's so many different examples of it. And I love how you connected it to the solstice and equinox, and I hope you're doing okay.
And it's interesting how whole religious celebrations have emerged from no more than the kind of experience that Chevy had or is going through.
Yeah.
I always like to think about the Hanukkah celebration. You know, there's this myth that Hanukkah, we light candles in a certain way because a temple was destroyed and there was no more oil, and they thought there was oil for one day, and there was really only, you know, then there really turned out to be oil for 8 days. But no, actually, before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, that candle lighting tradition had been going on. And the idea is that it's sympathetic magic, that when it's getting really dark, we want to sort of look up and tell the sky, we'd like more light, please. Yeah. And so I think
like decorating the tree with bulbs that look like fruit, like, don't forget, in the springtime, make more fruit, we'll need that.
Yeah. And I think I'd like to think that something that Chevy was doing, you know, in really being faithful to the pain, right? That when a loved one dies, pain is the way that we remember them and celebrate their importance to us. You know, it's the tribute that we give to the space that we made for that person in our lives that will never forget them.
Yeah.
And the idea of, you know, there will be more light in your life than there is in this grieving phase one day, and you light a candle both to remember and to look forward in some way is really powerful.
Yeah, and I just would also just say, I think that one of the things that's also hard about being secular is there's not the grief and funeral and mourning periods, like it's not laid out, and it's almost like a taboo subject because we don't have the language around it that people do when they're religious, whether it's based in reality or not. There's like stuff that there's a framework, and I think that one of the things that's really hard is when you lose someone and like the first couple of weeks, like everybody's ready to bring you food and checking on you, and then they go back to their regular life. But sometimes, that's only the very beginning of the period of feeling grief and loss, and it can be really a long time, and it's hard sometimes, especially with the amount of isolation that we all are experiencing, to also have the isolation where people have this like awkwardness. They don't want to bring it up. They don't want to, they think that they're going to remind you that you're upset if they text you months later and say, how are you doing? And I just say to anyone listening, watching, if you have someone in your life who lost someone, even if it's like 6 months or a year has gone by, like they're still in it, and just check in on them. And not, those first couple of weeks, everybody's ready to help. And then time goes on, and just, you're not going to do anything wrong by reminding them that you're thinking about them because they've experienced a loss.
Beautiful. Another comment, as a youth and raised in the church, what I miss most is the great music, choirs, and congregational singing. When I bring this up in my humanist groups, it's rarely acted on. I know we have Lenin's Imagine No Religion, but we need more.
Yeah.
Comments?
Yes, agree. Strongly agree. Music, like that is like, and it's so hard because it's like sometimes the stuff that we create, and I'm guilty of this for sure, but sometimes the stuff we create can feel really contrived because it doesn't come from like, you know what I mean? Because it's just people being
nobody
like,
wants to sing "Humanity Save the Queen."
Right, and it's right, exactly. I mean, well, monarchy is a whole other thing. But like, I totally agree, and I think there are songs, like popular songs, that you can use in that thing that people know. It's also because it's also the generational thing. It's like people, in church, synagogue, any religious setting where there's music, people grow up hearing the songs and then everyone knows it, and it's not like you don't have to learn something new in adulthood. It's really hard. But I think trial and error, and I think adopting something, repurposing something that exists that people are familiar with can be really useful, because it's hard to start something from scratch. But that's why every religion is built atop the ruins of another belief system, because you can't, right? It's like, it's really hard to get a whole bunch of people to start doing something brand spanking new. So we may have to just, slightly change things that already exist to serve our purposes when appropriate. But yeah, no, music for sure is crucial, I think.
By the way, the Flaming Lips is an example I'd love to throw out there. They're active humanists. They were part of the event that Sasha and I were part of over the summer with the Humanists for Biden. But there's so many other examples that we could go to. Like you have music in your life that's secular music that plays a ritual role in your life?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, the alphabet song, which I write about in the book. I won't go into it now because I don't think we have a ton of time left, but mine has basically an interaction with a taxi driver in Washington, D.C. when that was so weird and amazing that my husband and I thought that we were hallucinating, led us to sing the alphabet song together every week for it's been like 7.5 years. Now we have a little kid, so it's not as weird, but for a while, it's just two people in their 30s singing the alphabet song. But yeah, that is a ritual, and it is secular. And we sing. We definitely sing.
Great question from somebody on Facebook that the SSA is passing along with the conversation about appreciating our relationship with coffee and the forest. I have to wonder what they, meaning us, meaning we, think about indigenous knowledge and ritual.
Absolutely. Great question. Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is Braiding Sweetgrass, that book by Robin Kimmerwall. And, there's this division between what's natural and what's sacred that is central to so much of European culture and culture that came from Europe into the rest of the world. That is not that division that is so toxic in so many ways. It is not, there is no such division in Indigenous culture around the world. And I can see Cayuga Lake from where I'm sitting in Ithaca, New York, which, named for the Cayuga people. And that is, I think, such a source of so much beauty. And, all across the world, Indigenous cultures had a much clearer understanding of how we can feel that sacredness and holiness about nature, and how interconnected we are, and so many elements of, what now is scientifically substantiated about the interconnectedness of life on this planet that was just, obliterated and brushed aside and ignored by, colonial and imperialist powers all over the planet. So yes, I don't know how to sum up an answer to that, except that I have deep respect for Indigenous knowledge and ritual and its interconnectedness.
Had and have. I mean, I'll add that for myself, that I want to admit that I grew up, and I don't want to lay blame on my parents or anybody in particular. I'll say I almost raised myself even to take never an intentionally, but ultimately I feel a dismissive view of Indigenous cultures and people and their importance to my world. I mean, in the sense that I don't think I would have ever said anything, and I was lucky enough to learn about the Trail of Tears and things like that, even in high school. I don't think I would have ever said anything dismissive about Indigenous people or their cultures. But I don't think I would have said anywhere near enough to acknowledge my own indebtedness to them, our own indebtedness to them, our own ongoing crimes against them. And I feel like one of the rituals that I engage in with my son on a sort of periodic basis is just try, like, I don't know if I'm really there yet or if I've succeeded in this or whatever, but to try to get him to envision as he roams the world, that it wasn't always like this, and it doesn't have to be this way, and that there are people who were on this land in a different way before him, whose lands were stolen. And what does it mean to walk in those footsteps? But anyway, and I'd like to see that as part of the secular and humanist culture that we're building. So, all right, let me ask you this one, Sasha. Let's see, from Mim Chapman. Thanks so much. Marriage is such an important ritual, and I perform secular wedding, partnership, and divorce ceremonies. I recommend to my newlyweds that every year, near their anniversary, they get out their vows, see if there are things that they want to add or change, and have an recommitment ceremony, not an e-commitment ceremony. That would be tech religion.
Yeah.
And mini honeymoon. 3 years ago, I got married, and my hubby and I are following that advice every year in a different location with different friends. And we have a re-wedding ceremony. We love it. It's valuable secular ceremony for it. What are your thoughts on that?
Love it. Love it. Love all of it so much. As soon as I get off this call, I'm going to tell my husband we need an annual mini honeymoon. 100% on board for that. And yeah, I mean, right. The title of my book comes from this line that my parents wrote in the novel Contact, which is, "For small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love." And it's like on the other side of the existential crisis of like, we're here for a split second on a tiny out of the way planet, and we're going to die. Everyone's going to die. We're all going to die. The sun's going to die. Like, anxiety attack that, like, I mean, I'm assuming everyone on this call has at least gone into that direction at some point. It's really hard. But once you get through it and you come out the other side, it's like, well, then what do we have? We're just on this little planet. It's so beautiful at times, really brutal at other times, but it can be really beautiful. And we have one another. And this like celebration of love. And even if it's just, or not even if it's, I mean, that sort of minimizes it, but including the idea that it's chemicals in our brain and synapses firing and an evolutionary advantage because mammals do better in these situations. Whatever it is, it's sacred and beautiful. And when you fall in love and you have a great partner, and you know, anything you can do to celebrate and honor that and buttress it, you know, with more appreciation and gratitude for one another, when we're so aware that, you know, it's finite, I think is so great. And I mean, I just think, you know, rituals, I mean, wedding is such a window, even the most secular wedding is such a window into how much we love rituals to express our feelings and our emotions and what we're doing. It's such a great way to do this like performance art piece. I mean, some people elope and go to City Hall and that's great and like no shade. But when you have a wedding in front of people, it's like you're putting on a play about what's meaningful to you. And I think that there's something so, just to circle all the way back to the costumes, you know, I think there's something so profound and beautiful about that. And I think for all these different, I performed secular marriage for a friend of mine a few years ago. And it's such a special, beautiful thing to do that and to celebrate people falling in love. I think it's, I mean, what is better than that? And I mean, a divorce ceremony, I've never heard of it before. I have heard of people having a party, even together, to say thanks so much, best wishes, goodbye. But you know, all these changes in life, right? We have these rituals to process the change, whatever they are. That's why we've created all of these. And I think, you know, the more rituals, the more really delving into what we're doing and why and what it means to us, the better.
Yeah, particularly, I mean, if there's a marriage that involves children or other people that are cared for, et cetera, you know, other networks. I mean, you know, if a marriage does end in divorce, then, you know, the idea of ritually celebrating the fact that it's going to be respectful, it's going to be communicative, it's going to be a partnership in an ongoing way, you know, it strikes me as beautiful as well. So, all right, so we're almost at time. People are listing a lot of good music suggestions. From the recent May Day of Reason program that we did. I saw Margaret Downey, the great secular activist, list that. Some comments from her in the chat that are worth reading. And other song suggestions. Oh, what a beautiful morning every morning as a positive way to start the day with coffee, says Kate. Let's see. So we're in the home here of the secular.
Sorry, I just have to say there's someone saying that they have a secular band. A couple has a secular band called Nova Pangea, and I think that's a really good name. Sorry, just wanted to shout that out.
Nice. All right, so we're in the home of the Secular Student Alliance. We're going to turn it back to them for a great conference in a minute. Kevin, the executive director, was just saying that the group is incorporating more rituals as it is, graduation rituals and rituals to sort of help people feel a part of the community. What are your parting thoughts for this great organization, has been the leading organization for secular students and young people and people who are not yet students again, maybe, because I see some of my friends who are great secular activists on the Zoom as well. What rituals would you want an organization like this to consider incorporating or re-emphasizing in its life going forward, so for the next time that we're joining them? And that's our last question to take us out.
I think it's up to, you know, I think lots of celebrations when we can be in person again and have conferences and conversations, that's going to feel so new and joyful, I think, in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise appreciated it. But for each individual person and family and household, you know, I think letting yourself feel free to let that which is not serving you, just not go with what you believe, fall away, and find the things that really highlight what you truly believe and create more joy for yourselves and for your loved ones. I think there's so many ways to do that. And after this very strange, very difficult year, maybe we have a new vantage point to create that.
Well, Greg and Sasha, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us here today. I think seeing the book that you wrote, as we were talking a little bit before we started developing rituals and really trying to integrate that into for our chapters and providing supplies for, so when you have new members, having some sort of ritual to bring them into the group and bring them into the larger community and those things. When you have new officers of the chapters on campus, so we have lapel pins that we send them, and they're starting to develop rituals around that. We're presenting the lapel pin, and we also say, you're not just part of your local group, a leader now, you're actually part of a leader within the larger secular movement. And so really trying to get that, there's a bigger picture to this. Well, it's very easy for our students to see, I'm on my campus and this is my community, which it is, and it plays a super important role in their lives. We really do have this bigger family and bigger community that they're part of, and introducing them to that and making them feel welcome and those things, I think is incredibly important. I love having this conversation today. And I thank you so much for both of you being here. And we look forward, this is our second virtual conference. So we are very much looking forward to being back on a college campus in 2022 for the summer of. And I will say our conference is typically the largest gathering of secular students in the United States. And for all of us, it's this really, I think for the students who are been in their communities and seen individually, like their group, to come and all of a sudden see all these students across the country who are doing the same things, similar things, different things than they are in the same sphere is one of the most empowering sort of rituals, really, in the larger sense of it, that they get to experience. And even as staff, it is emotional to be there with them and those sorts of things. So we'll have to have you back at some time where you can actually experience that. Yeah. So it'd be wonderful. But appreciate your time today.
Kevin, great job. And I, as somebody who has hosted multiple SSA conferences in Massachusetts, I think I speak for us all when I say next year in Los Angeles.
we shall definitely see. Yeah, a lot of planning that'll go into place, and getting back on a campus and restarting that entire process again. But we're very much looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for having us today, Kevin. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.